Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I have a project to share with you. We're going to be making some nature journaling cards for our whale unit study. I'm showing you some of the books that we're going to be using as art inspiration as well as resources in order to include some of the trivia questions on the back of each of these cards. Now in the end, we're basically going to use 3 books for art inspiration, but all of these books were used for our unit. They are beautifully illustrated, packed with information, and really a joy to read. For this project, I'm going to be using my Fabriano 140-pound watercolor paper. This is nice and thick. It's especially great for wet-on-wet watercoloring, but today we're going to be using kind of a dry watercolor technique. I've trimmed down my cards so that they're 4.5 inches by 6 inches, and I'm taping them down onto my painting board, which actually didn't end up being necessary for this project, and I'll show you why later on. I'm using my distress inks for this project. I'm just going to squish down these ink pads onto a non-porous surface. These will work great as watercolors and they'll dry permanent like ink. The first book I'm going to use is Nature Anatomy by Julia Rotham. This is a really beautifully illustrated book on different nature topics. We do really enjoy using this in our nature study, but I found that it was a little bit difficult to use it as my only resource for our nature unit, so I've got some other books I'm going to show you. I rearranged my painting board because I realized that for our other projects, we did our nature cards in a vertical format, and this time we were going to do them in a horizontal format because that is going to work better for watercoloring whales. Okay, so I wasn't super pleased with my first couple of sperm whales, so I went ahead and did a third, and now I'm just going to outline it with some black distress ink using my paintbrush. But if you're working with children and they wish to do this, I would highly recommend you just using a pen after you are done watercoloring. It's a lot easier to have control over a pen than doing it with a watercolor brush. And something else that I found was that if my watercolor drawing wasn't completely dry, then when I started to outline it, the line wouldn't be straight and it would bleed into the project. So this project was actually a lot easier than some of the other nature cards that we've done in the past. I am only just doing the whale. I'm not doing a background or any other details in the foreground, and that made it go a lot easier. And plus, just the shape of the whale is a little bit easier than some of the other cards that we've done in the past, except for our astronomy cards. Those were the easiest to date. I'm also going to label all of the front of the cards with just the name of the whale, but the back side of the card, which is going to have trivia in the form of true and false questions, short answer questions, and multiple choice questions, those questions are going to be of a variety of topics, not just on the whale that's on the front of the card, because I didn't do any general information cards. We just went ahead and watercolored different whales. Now, this is for a nature unit study that I'm doing with my 8-year-old daughter and my 13-year-old son, and he's going to be doing a set of cards as well, and you'll get a sneak peek at those cards at the very end of this video. He chose to do his with chalk pastels, and that was a really beautiful medium to work with, but it's really hard to get a lot of detail with that. And I think in the end, his turned out great. But if you want more detail, then I would recommend using a different medium. Watercolors work great, but it's hard to control where the water is going to go and how the paint is going to move. So if you want a lot more detail than that, then using some colored pencils might be a good choice for you. In general, for a nature unit, we'll end up doing a lot of hands-on projects and quite a bit of artwork, but we rarely have a lot of written work to complement these units. In the past, we've had a lot of blank main lesson books, and recently doing these nature cards has fulfilled multiple purposes for our unit, and I'm super pleased with them. And I think that we'll be using these cards and making them for future nature units. The first thing is that you get your artwork in, which I do love doing artistic representations of our lesson for as many lessons as we can do. The second thing is that we are getting our written content on the back of each of these cards. Now, if you choose not to do trivia-based questions, you could do a short narration, or you could take these cards out into the field and use them as your nature journaling cards. So we're getting our written work in on the back, and the third but biggest perk of this whole entire project is being able to use these cards not just for this unit but for future units. We love playing the game once we're done making it, and as we have progressed with our units, we're trying to make the questions as challenging as possible. My son will make a set and I'll make a set, and then we'll play the game together. He'll have to answer my questions and I will have to answer his questions. Whoever gets the questions correct gets to keep the card, and at the end of the game you get to tally up who got the most cards. It's a really great, fun way to keep the learning alive throughout this unit as well as other units. It's a lot of fun to take these cards out when you're not even doing this unit and just kind of test yourself and see how much you remember. Now, trivia-based cards may not work for every homeschool and every student. My son happens to like the competitive nature of these cards and these kinds of games, but if your student does not, you might consider making this a cooperative game where everyone together tries to answer the questions if you don't know the answer. I also especially like using the distress inks for a project like this. I find that they come in a beautiful range of colors. They mix really well together, and I've been super pleased with the results so far. I think the beluga whale is one of my favorites. The less you do, the better it's going to turn out. The more I worked the drawings, the worse they were. So work them less, it's going to look better, and you're not going to tear up the paper either. All right, so I've removed them from the painting board, and you can see that I didn't really need the border around them. Since I'm not doing a wet on wet watercoloring technique, they're just going to be white all around. I really didn't need to tape them down. Now, once I was done, I decided to do just one more, and I chose this one because I liked the colors. I thought it'd be a nice addition to this set. Okay, so now it's time to do the written portion on the back of these cards. I've pulled several books, but the three that turned out to be the most useful were Nature Anatomy by Julia Rotham, Curious Kids Nature Guide by Fiona Cohen, and Whales, An Illustrated Celebration by Kelsey Ossed. Those three books ended up having the material that we needed in order to make these questions, but I have to say, of all three books, if you were only going to choose one, Whales, An Illustrated Celebration by Kelsey Ossed is the one to get. It was packed with information and had really beautiful illustrations. All right, so once that's all done, it's time to laminate them. I'm using my Black & Decker laminating sheets. These are 5mm sheets. This is going to protect our cards. You don't want anything to get smudged, especially with working with other mediums. For instance, my son's chalk pastels absolutely had to be laminated because otherwise those are just going to smudge everywhere. I used my Minc machine to laminate our cards. You could use any laminating machine that you'd like. And now I'm going to trim down our cards using my Caterpillar Pro. I'm just going to give them a slight border around each card, and that's it. Here's a closer look at all of the cards. This has been one of my favorite nature journaling card projects we've ever done. Now, all of the cards have been photographed and they are on the website at the blog post that accompanies this video. You can find that link down in the description box below, where you can also find more information about the books that we used for this project. Don't forget that if you want to see what our homeschool looks like on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.